They had mapped the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships moved through space like silver needles, threading the darkness between worlds with perfect grace. They believed they had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. They were wrong. Commander stood before the viewing screen of the survey vessel Eternal Calculation, her four-fingered hands clasped behind her back. The blue planet turning slowly in the void looked peaceful enough. Clouds swirled across its surface like white paint stirred in water. Oceans glittered under the light of a yellow sun. It was, by any measure, a beautiful world. The signals originated from this planet, said her science officer, a young named. Primitive radio transmissions, they call themselves humans. Had seen 1,000 primitive species before. Most of them never survived long enough to reach the stars. They burned themselves out with wars, or poisoned their worlds with industry, or simply faded away when the universe proved too harsh for their fragile bodies. She expected nothing different from these creatures. Then showed her the broadcasts. The images flickered across the screen in rapid succession. Saw mushroom clouds rising over flattened cities. She saw soldiers marching in endless columns, their boots crushing the bodies of the fallen. She saw mass graves being filled by machines while guards stood watching. She saw children with empty eyes staring out from behind barbed wire. She saw weapons pointed at the sky, ready to destroy everything at the press of a button. They have developed nuclear technology, said quietly, and they have already used it against their own population. Felt her stomach turn. In all her years of exploration, she had never seen a species so committed to its own destruction. They had abandoned warfare 3,000 years ago, recognizing it as the primitive impulse of lesser minds. These humans seemed to embrace it as their defining characteristic. Classification, she asked. Hesitated. The algorithms suggest primitive, but Commander, there are anomalies in the data that do not fit the standard model. Show me. More images appeared on the screen. A human running into a burning building to save a stranger's child. Soldiers carrying wounded enemies to safety instead of killing them. Strangers forming human chains to rescue flood victims they had never met. Millions of humans sending food and medicine to people on the other side of their world after a natural disaster. They are capable of remarkable acts of sacrifice and compassion, said. The contradictions are unlike anything in our records. They wage wars that kill millions, then risk their lives to save a single individual. They build weapons of mass destruction, then create organizations dedicated to feeding the hungry. I do not understand them. Studied the images for a long time. The creatures were small and soft, with no natural weapons or defenses. Their bodies were fragile, easily broken, and yet they had survived. They had not only survived, they had spread across their entire planet, adapting to every environment from frozen tundra to scorching desert. We will observe, she decided. Standard protocol for primitive species, no contact. The Eternal Calculation settled into a high orbit around the blue planet. For 30 cycles, and her crew watched the humans go about their violent, confusing lives. They documented wars and peace treaties, disasters and recoveries, cruelty and kindness in equal measure. The data filled thousands of files, and none of it made sense. Became obsessed with understanding them. She spent her rest cycles studying human history, learning their languages, reading their literature. She watched their entertainment broadcasts and listened to their music. She came to one evening with an unusual request. I believe they deserve our intervention, she said. Looked up from her reports, explain. There is an asteroid on collision course with their planet. It will arrive in 18 of their months. It is large enough to cause an extinction-level event. And you believe we should warn them? Straightened her spine. Yes, Commander. I believe they have potential that the algorithms cannot measure. Considered the young scientist for a long moment. She thought about the mushroom clouds and the mass graves. She thought about the burning buildings and the human chains. The Council will need to approve any contact with a primitive species, she said. You will present your case to them. The Council of the Collective met on the 1,000 light-years from the blue planet where humanity waited unknowing for its doom. Stood before the 12 ancient beings who governed the collective, her arguments prepared with careful precision. She spoke of human resilience. She described how they had survived ice ages and plagues, wars and famines. She showed them examples of human creativity, their art and music and literature. She presented data on their rapid technological advancement, from stone tools to nuclear power in the blink of a cosmic eye. The council listened in silence. When she finished, the eldest member spoke. You ask us to interfere with the natural course of events for a species that has demonstrated consistent, self-destructive behavior. Why should we save them from extinction when they seem determined to bring it upon themselves? Had prepared for this question, because they are more than the sum of their violence. They have something that we lost long ago, something that I believe the galaxy needs. They have fire. The council murmured among themselves. Fire was an old word, one that they had not used in. It meant passion, drive, the burning need to survive against all odds. They had evolved beyond such primitive impulses, achieving perfect peace through the elimination of strong emotions. But some wondered in private moments whether they had lost something precious in the process. The vote was close. 7 in favor, 5 opposed. The council authorized a single warning transmission to be sent to the human planet. Expected chaos when the message arrived. She expected the humans to panic, to riot, to blame one another, and launch their nuclear weapons in a final spasm of destruction. She had seen other species react this way to the news of their impending doom. She prepared her reports on the expected extinction of yet another primitive race. Instead, she watched something extraordinary. The humans received the message on 1,000 different receivers around their world. Within hours, their leaders were communicating with one another. Within days, old enemies were sharing technology and resources. Within weeks, humans who had spent generations fighting each other were working side by side on a common goal. This is impossible, whispered, watching the data streams flood her screens. Stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. They are magnificent. The humans had never built a vessel capable of reaching another planet. They had barely touched the edge of space, sending a few fragile explorers to their nearest moon. But faced with extinction, they accomplished in months what should have taken decades. Their ships were ugly things, cobbled together from whatever materials they could find. They were dangerous, unstable, more likely to kill their crews than reach their destination. And yet humans volunteered to crew them by the thousands, knowing they might not survive. The asteroid was enormous, a mountain of rock and ice tumbling through the void. The human ships reached it with barely any time to spare. They planted explosives in its surface. They rammed it with their vessels. They did everything possible to change its course. 347 humans died in the operation. Their ships burned and broke apart, scattering their bodies across the cold void of space. And yet the survivors kept working, kept fighting, kept refusing to accept their own destruction. In the end, they succeeded. The asteroid passed by their planet, close enough to light up their skis, far enough to leave them unharmed. The humans celebrated in the streets of every nation, embracing strangers, weeping with joy, united for one brief moment in shared triumph. Watched the celebrations on her screen. She felt something she had not experienced in years of service, something she barely recognized anymore. She felt awe. Commander said softly, "They recovered pieces of our warning beacon from the debris. They are studying it." Felt a chill run through her body. The beacon contained technology far beyond human understanding. It should have taken them centuries to decipher even its most basic functions. But she had learned by now not to underestimate these creatures. How long until they understand it? ran the calculations, then ran them again, refusing to believe the results. At their current rate of progress, perhaps 50 years, maybe less. Turned away from the screen. She thought about the Council's decision to warn the humans, about the assumption that a primitive species posed no threat to the collective's dominion over the stars. She thought about all the reports she had filed over 30 cycles, the careful documentation of human violence and human kindness, human cruelty and human sacrifice. "We have made a mistake," she said quietly. "Commander." We looked at them and saw savages. We saw their wars, their weapons, their endless capacity for destruction. But we missed something important. We missed their fire. She turned back to the screen, where humans were still dancing in their streets, still celebrating their survival. They did not know that they were being watched. They did not know that their victory had changed the course of galactic history. "Send a message to the Council," ordered. "Tell them to prepare. The savages are coming to the stars." 50 years passed like a heartbeat. The watch from afar as humanity spread across its solar system like a virus, building stations and colonies and shipyards with terrifying speed. They had expected the humans to settle into comfortable complacency once the immediate threat had passed. Instead, the species seemed driven by an urgent need to expand, to grow, to reach beyond its cradle and claim its place among the stars. Ambassador of the Collective had spent her entire career studying alien civilizations. She had made first contact with 17 different species, guiding each one through the delicate process of joining the galactic community. She believed she understood how primitive races thought, how they reacted to the discovery that they were not alone in the universe. The humans did not behave as expected. Her shuttle descended through the atmosphere toward the massive orbital station that humanity had built near their fourth planet. From above, the station looked like a metal flower, its petals spreading outward to catch the light of the distant sun. It was crude by standards, all sharp angles and exposed machinery, but there was something impressive about its sheer scale. A human delegation waited for her in the docking bay, studied them as she walked down the shuttle's ramp, trying to read their expressions. The creatures were smaller than she had expected, soft and vulnerable without natural armor or weapons. Their eyes moved constantly, taking in everything around them with quick, nervous energy. The leader of the delegation stepped forward. He was old for a human, his hair turned white with age, but he moved with the confident ease of a much younger being. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. "Ambassador, welcome to station. I am Director and I will be your guide during your stay." Inclined her head in the traditional greeting. "Thank you, Director. The Collective is pleased to begin formal diplomatic relations with your species." Smiled, and something in his expression made uneasy. It was not a threatening look, not exactly, but there was a sharpness behind his eyes that reminded her of a predator assessing its prey. "We are pleased as well," he said. "We have been looking forward to this meeting for a long time." The tour of the station confirmed suspicions. The humans had not simply reverse-engineered the warning beacon they had recovered 50 years ago. They had improved upon it. Their ships were still ugly things, lacking the elegant curves of design. But they were fast and sturdy, built to survive impacts that would destroy more sophisticated vessels. And they were armed. Every human ship carried weapons. Every corridor on the station had reinforced walls and emergency blast doors. Every human she passed wore clothing with hidden pockets, and she suspected those pockets were not empty. "Why do you maintain such extensive military capabilities?" she asked as they walked through a training facility where young humans practiced combat techniques. "The galaxy has been at peace for 3,000 years." Watched his people sparring for a moment before answering. "Ambassador, my grandmother survived a war that killed 60 million of her people. My grandfather fought in a conflict that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. My parents grew up hiding in shelters, wondering if each day would be their last." He turned to face her, and his eyes were ancient despite his years. "Peace is not the natural state of the universe," he said. "It is a temporary condition, maintained only by those who are prepared to defend it. History has taught us this lesson again and again. We will not forget it." Wanted to argue with him. She wanted to explain that the collective had evolved beyond such primitive fears, that warfare was a disease of lesser minds that enlightened species had long since cured. But something in his words resonated with an old memory, a whisper from her species' distant past. That had not always been peaceful. Before the Reformation, before the gene therapies that had eliminated aggressive impulses, her ancestors had fought wars just as terrible as anything the humans had experienced. The collective had chosen to remove that capacity from their species, believing it to be the path to true civilization. But standing here, watching humans train for battles they hoped would never come, wondered if perhaps something important had been lost. The news arrived 3 days into her diplomatic mission. A courier ship appeared at the edge of the solar system, broadcasting an emergency signal. Received the message in her quarters and felt her blood run cold. The Dominion had attacked. They were an old threat, an expansionist empire that had lurked at the edges of known space for centuries. The collective had maintained an uneasy peace with them through careful diplomacy and mutual avoidance. But something had changed. They had grown bold or desperate, and they had chosen this moment to strike. 12 worlds had fallen in the first wave. Billions of her people were dead or enslaved. The collective's defense fleet, designed for policing and patrol rather than warfare, had been swept aside like dust before a storm. Sat in the darkness of her quarters, trying to process the magnitude of the disaster. Everything she had believed about the galaxy, about peace and civilization and the triumph of enlightened minds, had been proven wrong in a single devastating blow. A knock at her door interrupted her grief. Director stood in the corridor, his face grim. Behind him could see other humans moving with urgent purpose. "Ambassador," he said, "we have received news of the attack on your people. I am authorized to inform you that the United Earth Fleet is preparing to deploy in support of the collective." Stared at him in disbelief. "You would help us. We barely know each other. We have not even signed a formal alliance." Stepped into her quarters and placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was strange, more intimate than normally allowed, but somehow comforting. "Ambassador, 50 years ago your people saved us from extinction. You gave us a warning when you could have let us die. We do not forget our debts." The human fleet launched within days. Traveled with them aboard the flagship, a massive vessel named the Unconquered. She watched in horrified fascination as the humans prepared for war. They were so different from her people approached problems with careful analysis, weighing options and calculating outcomes before taking action. The humans seemed to operate on pure instinct, making decisions in moments that would have taken the collective weeks to approve. And their soldiers were terrifying. Had seen violence before, documented in historical records and surveillance footage. But watching human warriors train for combat was something else entirely. They moved with brutal efficiency, every motion designed to damage and destroy. They practiced killing techniques with the same dedication that artists brought to their sculptures. General, the commander of the ground forces, noticed her watching from the observation deck. She was a tall woman with dark skin and silver hair, her body marked with old scars. "Does our training disturb you, Ambassador?" she asked, climbing the stairs to stand beside. "I confess that it does," admitted. "I have never seen beings so committed to the practice of destruction." Nodded slowly. "We are not proud of what we are," she said. "Every human child grows up learning about the horrors our ancestors committed against each other. We teach ourselves to be ashamed of our violent nature. And yet you continue to cultivate it." The general turned to look out the window at the stars. "Because the universe does not care about our shame. It does not reward the peaceful or punish the aggressive. It simply is, vast and cold and indifferent. We learned long ago that survival is not given, it must be taken. She faced again, and her expression was almost sympathetic. Your people tried to eliminate the capacity for violence from your species. You thought you were building a better civilization, but you were actually building a prey species. And now the predators have noticed you. The first battle came sooner than expected. A patrol fleet intercepted them at the edge of collective space, 8 warships against the 20 vessels of the human formation. The commander broadcast a demand for surrender, clearly expecting the humans to flee or submit. Watched the battle from the Unconquered's command center, her heart's pounding in her chest. The ships were larger and better armed than the human vessels. By any reasonable calculation, the humans should have withdrawn to wait for reinforcements. Instead, they attacked. The human ships flew directly into the formation, accepting devastating fire in exchange for close-range engagement. Saw vessels burning, atmosphere venting from torn hulls, humans dying by the hundreds, and still they pressed forward. When the human ships began ramming the vessels, finally understood what it meant about the lessons of history. The humans were not fighting to win, they were fighting to survive, and for them there was no difference between the two. Victory or death were the only options their psychology allowed them to consider. The fleet was destroyed in less than an hour. The humans lost 6 ships and over 1,000 soldiers. They mourned their dead with brief ceremonies, then immediately began planning their next engagement. Found Admiral Wei, the fleet commander and director's daughter, in the tactical center. The young woman was studying star maps, marking positions with red light. "How do you do it?" asked. "How do you watch your people die and then immediately return to planning more death?" Wei did not look up from her maps, because stopping means losing, and losing means more death than fighting ever could. She finally raised her eyes to meet gaze. "Ambassador, my people have a saying, the only easy day was yesterday. It means that no matter how hard things are today, tomorrow will be harder. We have learned to accept this truth and keep moving forward anyway. It is the only way we have survived." The campaign lasted 18 months, remained with the human fleet throughout, documenting everything she witnessed. She saw battles that would haunt her dreams forever. She saw humans die in numbers that comprehension. And she saw something else, something that changed her understanding of the universe. She saw humans carry wounded soldiers to medical bays instead of killing them. She saw prisoners treated with dignity and respect, even when they had shown none to captured humans. She saw mercy practiced alongside ruthlessness, compassion walking hand in hand with violence. They did not understand it. Their commanders reported that the humans were insane, unpredictable, impossible to analyze using standard tactical models. They could not comprehend an enemy that fought without hatred, that killed without cruelty, that offered surrender terms after every engagement. In the end, it was not human weapons that broke the Dominion. It was human mercy. Word spread through the ranks that surrender meant survival, that the terrible humans would treat prisoners better than their own commanders did. Defections began, slowly at first, then in a flood that overwhelmed the Dominion's ability to maintain discipline. When the final battle came, fully a third of the fleet refused to fight. The ruins of the still smoldered when the peace negotiations began. Ambassador sat at a long table, surrounded by representatives of a dozen species. The humans occupied one end, the surviving leadership the other. In between sat the various members of the collective and the neutral observers who had come to witness history. Admiral Wei spoke for humanity. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with years of war. But her voice was steady as she laid out the terms that would reshape the galaxy. "The Dominion will disarm," she said. "Your military will be reduced to defensive capabilities only. Your conquered territories will be returned to their original inhabitants, and you will pay reparations to every species you have harmed. The High Commander, a massive creature covered in armored scales, leaned forward with a rumble of displeasure. You ask us to become helpless. What guarantee do we have that you will not simply conquer us once we have disarmed? Wei did not hesitate, none. The chamber erupted in confused murmuring, saw the delegation exchange uncertain glances. You demand our trust, the High Commander said slowly, but offer nothing in return. I offer you a choice, Wei replied. You can accept these terms and build something new from the ashes of your empire, or you can refuse, and we will continue fighting until there is nothing left of your species to negotiate with. She stood, and her shadow seemed to fill the room. Let me be clear, High Commander. Humanity did not come to the stars seeking conquest. We came seeking survival. Everything we have done, every battle we have fought has been in defense of that single goal. If you threaten us, we will destroy you. If you leave us in peace, we will do the same. She walked around the table until she stood before the delegation, a small human woman facing creatures twice her size. My grandmother survived a genocide. My grandfather fought in a world war. My mother grew up in the shadow of nuclear weapons pointed at her own cities. We have learned what hatred costs, High Commander. We have paid that price in the blood of billions. And we have chosen, despite everything, to be better than our history. She extended her hand, palm up, in the human gesture of peace. The question is whether you can do the same. The silence stretched for an eternity, held her breath, watching the fate of empires balance on a single moment. Then the High Commander reached out and took the human's hand. The treaty was signed 3 days later. The Dominion ceased to exist, replaced by a federation of autonomous worlds under collective supervision. The human fleet began its long journey home, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed by their presence. Traveled with them, no longer an ambassador but a friend. She spent the voyage recording everything she had witnessed, trying to capture in words the impossible contradiction of humanity. On the last night before reaching Earth, she found Wei alone on the observation deck, watching the stars slide past. May I ask you something, Admiral? Wei smiled. After everything we have been through together, I think you have earned that right. What do you want? Not humanity as a whole, but you personally. After all this fighting, all this sacrifice, what do you hope for? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. I want to grow old in peace. I want to watch my play without worrying about whether they will live to see adulthood. I want to wake up one morning and not immediately start planning for the next disaster. She turned to face, and her eyes were tired but at peace. I want what everyone wants, Ambassador. Safety, security, the chance to build something that lasts. We are not so different from you, really. We are just a little younger, a little rougher around the edges. She looked back at the stars. Give us time. We will civilize ourselves eventually. Thought about everything she had seen. The violence and the mercy, the destruction and the creation, the endless contradictions that made humanity so difficult to understand. I hope not, she said quietly. I think the galaxy needs you exactly as you are. The ceremony took place in the great hall of the collective's capital, a vast chamber that had witnessed 12,000 years of galactic history. Representatives of every member species filled the tiered seating, their varied forms creating a tapestry of color and shape. At the center of the chamber stood the human delegation, looking small and fragile among the gathered might of civilized space. Elder, ancient now but still sharp-eyed, rose to address the assembly. She had watched these creatures from orbit 50 years ago, had seen their violence and their contradictions, had warned the council that they were coming to the stars. Now she stood before them as they took their place among the stars' inheritors. Today we welcome a new member to our community, she said. A species that was deemed primitive by our algorithms, savage by our standards and impossible by our expectations. They have proven all of our assessments wrong. She turned to face the human delegation, where Admiral Way stood in her worn uniform, surrounded by diplomats and scientists and ordinary citizens who had traveled across the void to witness this moment. Humanity, you have taught us something valuable. You have reminded us that civilization is not a destination but a journey. You have shown us that strength and mercy can exist together, that violence can serve peace, that the savage heart can beat with compassion. She extended her hands in the ancient gesture of welcome. We offer you full membership in the collective. May your fire light the way for us all. The applause that followed shook the ancient walls. Watched Wei accept the honors with the same quiet dignity she had shown throughout the war, neither boastful nor humble, simply present in the moment. Later, after the ceremonies were finished and the delegates had dispersed to their various celebrations, found Wei standing alone on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The admiral held a small device in her hands and recognized it as a communication unit. "News from home?" she asked, joining the human at the railing. Wei nodded. "My daughter gave birth this morning, a boy. They are naming him after my father." "Congratulations, that is wonderful news." The admiral tucked the device away and looked out at the alien city, its spires and domes stretching toward the unfamiliar stars. "When I was young," she said, "I used to dream of the stars. I imagined what it would be like to travel between them, to meet other beings, to discover the secrets of the universe. I never imagined it would involve so much death." "Do you regret it?" Wei considered the question carefully before answering. "I regret every life lost, every soldier who died under my command, every enemy who fell to our weapons, every innocent caught in the crossfire. I will carry those regrets until the day I die." She turned to face, and her eyes were wet but steady. "But I do not regret fighting. I do not regret doing what was necessary to protect my people and my allies, because the alternative was extinction, and that is a price I was never willing to pay." She looked up at the stars again. "We are savages, Ambassador. Your people were right about that from the beginning. We came from a world that taught us to fight for every breath, to claw our way up from the mud through endless struggle and sacrifice. That violence is written into our very genes." Her voice softened. "But we are also dreamers. We look at the stars and see not obstacles but opportunities. We face extinction and respond with hope. We carry our savage hearts to the heavens and dare to imagine a better future." She smiled, and for a moment she looked young again, young and full of wonder at the vastness of the universe. "That is what it means to be human, Ambassador. To be savage and civilized, brutal and kind, despairing and hopeful all at once. We contain multitudes, and we will not apologize for any of them." Stood beside her friend in the alien night, watching the stars wheel overhead. She thought about all the species that had risen and fallen over all the civilizations that had been deemed primitive and left to their fate. She thought about the algorithms and the categories, the neat labels that tried to reduce the infinite complexity of intelligent life to simple classifications. And she thought about the strange, contradictory, impossible creatures who had come from a small blue world to change the course of galactic history. "Thank you," she said quietly. Wei looked at her with curiosity. "For what?" "For being exactly what we needed. For being savages among the stars. For showing us that there is more than one path to civilization, and that perhaps our path was not as complete as we believed." The human admiral laughed, a warm and genuine sound that echoed across the balcony. "We are just getting started, Ambassador. Give us a few thousand years. By then, we might actually know what we are doing." They stood together as the night deepened around them, two beings from different worlds united by something stronger than shared interests or strategic alliances. They were united by hope, that most human of emotions, that burning faith in the possibility of a better tomorrow. The savages had come to the stars, and the stars would never be the same.